Welcome to The Longer Game, the only show that's dedicated to the future of retail. We bring on real-life people in the retail industry. We talk about their experiences, we share their stories, we apply it to what's currently going on in the market, and we look towards the future of retail. You could say it's retail reimagined. My name is Michael Marr. I run a customized, done-for-you service agency called Cartology that helps brands win on Amazon. Now, while my expertise stems in the Amazon field, we bring on a wide array of guests because retail is expansive. You've got e-commerce. Yes, you've got marketplaces like Amazon. You've also got brick and mortar that is evolving. You've got logistics. You've got technology, finance. There are so many aspects to retail, and it's complicated. So we're here to bring you the entire story. Do you think that you have an interesting story and you'd like to tell it on the podcast? Then go to thelongergame.com and fill out a form to be a guest on the show today. You can catch The Longer Game on any social channels: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and our website, thelongergame.com. We've got all awesome guests on this show, so that I will promise. Are you ready to hear more about the future of retail? Let's get down to business. Welcome everybody to The Longer Game. The host, I am the host. Wow, I really messed up that intro already. Let's try again, everybody. Welcome to The Longer Game. I'm your host, Michael Marr, and we're going to talk about retail. I already wasted like 30 seconds messing up my intro, so I'm going to tell you that I have a really awesome guest on my podcast and someone I would consider a friend. The past couple people I feel like I've been able to consider friends, and I always say, we'll see what they say, so she will get a chance to respond. But I have Carol Shih, the Chief Everything Officer of Qode Space. I'm now just second-guessing everything that I say, but you are a web development agency, or you're a human, but you own a web development agency. Tell us more about that, Karen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's such an honor to be on The Longer Game. Honestly, you're doing great, by the way. I've been listening to your podcast, and it's a great start and really good intro for a lot of agency owners. And yes, I own Qode Space. I'm the founder, and we are a web development agency, and we're female and minority owned, which is very few. There's very little of us in the space, so hopefully to stand out more.
I think you stand out. You're also just really funny and cool to be around. So maybe we need more of those people too. Not the jackasses.
You know what? I do play towards that. I think I flash that card quite often. There's really not a lot of us that look like us in the space, especially in the development space, marketing, creative. There's a lot of us, and when I say a lot of us, I'm talking about female minorities. A lot of us tend to be in the middle management role. And I think us standing out and us being moms really does play a huge role. And I think that is a foundation to build a lot of trust within our brands. So yeah, I do play that card, and I'm proud of it.
I think if you own who you are and just embrace that, I think it's very... And just be true to yourself. I feel like it's very hard to go wrong in that place. And I think if you, regardless of who you are, if you make it more about you instead of just being you, like, hey, look at me, pay attention to me, but also if it's less about that and more about like, hey, this is just who I am. I'm showing up as myself. I'm representing myself. I'm representing the people that I feel are part of my community. I think it becomes a lot more authentic.
I was just going to say, I think it was authenticity where you and I connected. I think you and I met at what was it? It was like a master group for agency owners, correct? Yeah. And then I reached out. I said, hey, what you're saying. Also, you were quite active in those groups. There was like 60 of us, and you always spoke up. And I was like, yeah, we're going to be friends with that guy.
I just feel like if you don't say anything at all, no one's going to be listening. No one's going to be paying attention. I tell that to my team all the time. Like, I constantly say, hey, if you need something, let me know. And then sometimes people don't say anything. And I've said, I think I've made it clear that I'm here to support you. But if you don't tell me what's going on, like, I want to hear from you. If you don't tell me, there's nothing I can do to help you. And then it becomes about you suffering in silence.
That is such a common trend, though, especially in the agency world. A lot of times we are so money focused, we do not allow our employees to give us feedback. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I try to change when I started my own is that I want to hear feedback from you guys at all times. How can I be a better leader? How can I help you guys grow so that the company can grow? I'm a firm believer of James Clear, where you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And that starts with authenticity of who we are and how I interact with employees. So, absolutely right. If you weren't as funny as you were on those meetings, I wouldn't have reached out. So, hey, be yourself.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and all the clowning around in grade school, junior high, high school, all that, paid off. Now, I will say I've had to learn to like pull it back a little bit and just
Same.
refine it, so rough around the edges. But in real life, I think it's sometimes game on depending upon the person, and I can have a really good time with people and just be real.
100%. The amount of times that I've offended people. But you know what? They come back.
I think you know what when I was at a conference recently, all Amazon focused, and I was talking with a bunch of people, and there were a couple of things that I said, like jokes, either people didn't get, they didn't land, they ended up being really awkward. And I just was like, hey, I got to be okay to let some of that stuff not land. But then the stuff that does, it ends up being funny or interactive. And then if something doesn't land, I'm okay to say, man, that was just really awkward. I'm really sorry. And hopefully we can start over and we can just go in a different direction. But like, I'm okay if it doesn't. I think you should be okay to offend people, but not take it personally, and hopefully see the intent of that person and maybe just say like, hey, you said that thing. What did you mean by that? And I see that on a personal level. I see that on a work level. And I remember very, very early on in my management career, I said something, and there was a woman I was working with, and she's like, hey, that kind of like hurt my feelings. She took it a totally different way than I intended it. But I just said, hey, I'm really like, thanks for telling me. I'm really sorry. That's not what I meant at all. Like, here's what I meant. But like, just know totally not what I was going for with that. And it was great. Like, I know it wasn't comfortable for her to bring it up. It's a little
Yeah.
uncomfortable to like deal with that interaction. But like, imagine if we could talk about things, not take it personally, and even if we don't agree on it, but like at least be willing to have the conversation.
Oh, yeah. I've been reprimanded for my humor very often, especially as an Asian female and in leadership. I have gotten called into office. I used to work for an agency as well. That's how I got my green card. And I've gotten called in to the office before and be like, hey, this client really doesn't like you being this loud. You really need to pull back. Like, you need to watch what you say. Probably is the reason why I started my own, because nobody can tell me what to do.
I got to be honest. I've definitely been reprimanded for my style or for how I do things, and there's a level of authenticity that I'm able to bring in certain scenarios, and when I do, I lean into that. I mean, but I remember very early on working at before I was an e-commerce owner, like business owner, and then started an agency. And when I was starting that e-commerce business, I was working at Starbucks, and my boss just sucked. Like, she was I had a great boss before her. She was super supportive. I took over a store that was really underperforming, and people were complaining that I was making them follow the rules. And she was telling me like, hey, I got your back. I know that you're doing the right stuff. People are going to complain. Don't worry about it. And then someone else took over, and she was the exact opposite. Tried to get people fired, got people fired. I was able to leave, but at a certain point, I would give feedback, or I would just be myself, and it was like, you're not really helping. You're being you're being negative or counterproductive or something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, like, there's only so far I can get. And like, I very vividly remember in one of my reviews, she's just telling me all this stuff. I knew like I was 6 months out from being away or being
Mhm.
out, and I just was like, okay. And she was like, it's weird. You're not saying anything. You're being kind of quiet. I'm like, yep, all good.
How much of that disruptive, but you're so right, because how much of that disruptiveness in you brought you to be who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of used to typecast myself. Now I'm getting interviewed, which I like. I kind of used to get typecast as rebellious, or I used to do that to myself. And I think a part of it like I talked with someone about this a couple of years ago, and it's like maybe you were a little rebellious, but maybe it wasn't just that. It was you feeling like you had to fit into this certain thing, and so you felt constrained by that, which I think is true. So I mean, honestly, there's like business acumen was not my number one thing. There's a lot that I've had to learn, a lot I've had to learn in the sales process, running a business, managing people. But I do think the
Yeah.
interpersonal thing and how I interact with people and how I show up has been helpful. And I had a conversation with two people on my team today about like setting expectations for a meeting. What should you be doing? What am I wanting you to do? But also reminding them you need help. If you need help, you need to let me know. And the feedback that I got was, I appreciate that a lot about you, and I'm having to adjust, or a lot of us are having to adjust to that in you, because most bosses are not saying, hey, I want to hear from you, or I want to help. Usually if we bring something up, and this is across, like my team is international. So, a woman in Romania and a guy in the Philippines are saying the exact same thing. Most people don't say that. They're like, oh, you can't do that. I don't care. Or, just figure it out. And so we're having to adjust to that. And I said, can totally appreciate that. Just know I've said this a lot. So you're just at a certain point just going to have to speak up and do it, and know that like I've got your best interest at heart.
Be bold, be brave, be kind.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not that it's very simple, but sometimes it's very difficult to do because of, I have a friend who's in the Amazon space. He and I talk a lot. He's been both brand and agency side, but I think he actually has work hurt. Like he's been hurt
Oof.
because he's been treated like a commodity, or hey, we don't need you anymore. We're going to let you go. And it was just to save stuff on the books. But like, yeah, that very much can hurt, and people are have past hurt from that, and then that's creates scar tissue, and so then they act according to what they feel like they could be experiencing, and they're bracing for that.
So I'm Australian and Taiwanese. So when I came to the States, I was 19. I came here for university, and one of the biggest goal I needed was to obtain my green card, or else I get kicked out and go home. And so I fought really hard at work, and it was a lot of like embracing all those hurt, because I felt like if I through this, I wouldn't be able to get the green card, and I would have been get deported. So that hurt was so familiar for me. It was really being put at the corner and shut up and do things what you're supposed to be doing and get very low salary, but you're going to get a green card. Isn't that what you want? And so a lot of times that when we're younger, when we're driven, we do get silenced by a lot of that kind of pressure being someone who you're not, right? And I think that being mature and grow into the space is really learning how to push back and draw boundaries, but at the same time also learning who you really are and when you should learn to speak up. I feel really deeply when you say about office pains. I had a great mentor that I call the office therapist. Happen, they say this and I say that. And, that is when I start to learn about how to manage up, how to be a better leader, how to not be a certain way. And now, what is this, 10 years in, I started my own company, 2018. I really, really pull that to heart. That pain and those memories was the reason why I started CodeSpace with those core value, with quality, transparency, building the community, and really being purposeful in what we do, right? And also why I love your podcast called The Longer Game, because I always tell my team, we're not doing this for tomorrow for that revenue. We're doing this for the infinite game, like what Simon Sinek said.
Damn it, I should have changed my podcast to The Infinite Game. Why did I not contact you before?
It's good though. It's good. The longer game. We can keep going longer. But yeah, I always put the heart. So when you talk about pain, I pull it closer to my heart, because I think a lot of times that pain really drives you to be the core person who you should be.
I would be remiss if I didn't talk about like the revenue piece and the growth piece as an agency. And I think that more often than not actually impacts the client, and people are not necessarily thinking about that. But when you are in rapid growth mode, there is going to be some chaff basically that falls off. And when the goal just becomes revenue, I've talked with other agency owners about this as well, my space, outside of my space, when it's just revenue, it becomes very difficult to focus on quality. It's not that they're mutually exclusive of each other, but especially like in hyper growth mode, when the expectation is, especially with investors, and I don't have investors really for, a reason, because I want to be able to run things my way. Now that means I've had to sacrifice, like financially, I've had to sacrifice on stuff, and I'm sure you've experienced that as well. And I'm very thankful that I have a very supportive wife who has a much more stable job than I do, because that allows me to have some flexibility, but there can be some upside as well. And I get to spend a lot of time, or at least have flexibility to spend time with my daughter or take her to school in the morning or things like that. So I genuinely appreciate that. But like that rapid growth can hurt the client and mean the quality of your work is much less. And so a lot of times when you focus on quality, you have to slow down a little bit. But I think that ultimately means you serve those clients better. Your team gets served better because you can actually pay somewhat attention to them. And then in that quest for playing the longer game or playing the infinite game, you actually see better long-term results. But it takes time and a lot of patience, which I did not, that's not my MO is patience.
It's also cultural. I noticed that. I grew up in Asia, and so I've always seen business, like my own family business has been 40 years. And I don't really see that in
Wow.
the United States, to see a company, a family-grown company that's lasted for that long. I think there's a lot more corporates that are that way. But businesses nowadays, they last for 5, 10 years at most. And I think that has to do with a lot what you say is that rapid growth. When you install the rapid growth, we need to get money, money, money now. And that was my background, was fashion e-commerce. It's year over year. How much are we growing? We need to push for 30%, 40%. You're not being human. You're not being human to yourself. You're not being human to your employees. You're acting like everyone is a machine, right? And you're acting like people are purchasing your stuff like a machine, returning visitors, you're going to buy the same thing. That's just not how life works. People get sick. People are slowed down for certain reasons. People have babies. People have families. And I think a lot of times corporates are building their company and brands are building their brands like we're not human. And so that infinite game is even more important to understand. And I think I approach our brands that way. I always ask, what do you do outside of just working, working, working? And I think that is also a reason why we pull in so much female founders, because we understand we play multiple roles. We're a founder, we're a leader, we're office therapists at times, right? We're also mother, we're sisters, and we're wives, right? Important conversations really to have is about, what are you really looking for when you're building this business? And I know it could really, really get complicated, because people are like, oh, I'm just here to ask you if you could develop my Shopify site. And I'm
Like,
here,
why are we talking about this?
really do. Yeah. Yeah, like, what do you really want to do in 5 years? But when I do have those conversations, it's the whole relationship is built on trust. And I think you and I had that moment too. I think when we first met, we had a powwow, 1 hour, just to get to know each other. And when we realized what our core values are aligned, that conversation just becomes much smoother because we're building on trust.
There's a lot of great things in the world, and it always gets ruined by humans.
That's what we do.
Have you ever noticed that? Now, listen, I believe that people are made in God's image and that they can have a great capacity to do great stuff. But I also know that there's bad stuff in the world. It's just been that way since the beginning of time. And humans end up, the problem is people that are humans that treat other people like robots, you now give someone a bad experience, and it's very likely that they will, walk away with hurt from that. It's very easy for us as humans to become tribal and then stereotype that person and say, oh, because you did this. And it goes all around. And, interesting is, like, America didn't create the idea of stereotypes. Like, it's everywhere. I know, because I know that it happens in Asia. It happens in Africa. It happens in Europe. Like, it happens everywhere. But then we as humans get hurt. And so we start to you know, we start to curl up, and we don't become vulnerable, we don't become transparent, we become hard, and then we start to treat, I think, other people like robots. And what I was going to say is, what you're talking about, like being real, especially as an agency owner, yeah, like do I need to know what you do as a client outside of work? Not necessarily, but I think what we're talking about here, it's twofold. So one is, I believe that a lot of people, like I said, mess up stuff, and they're misrepresentations of stuff. And like I said, I believe people are creating God's image. Well, just in that same way, like a lot of people that say they represent that or represent God actually don't, or they're human and they turn people off to that thing. But I think that there's a core of really being identified with God that I resonate with. And what you're talking about is, people need to know, in this context, know God and be known by God. And that's really what you're talking about as a human. Like, I need to know other people and be known by those people. And that, I think, is what's really powerful. And that is how you differentiate as an agency owner. Now, you also have to get results too. Like, that has to be a part of it. You can't just know and be known and then like, hey, by the way, I didn't get your website done, but man, it's so great talking to you. Like, people won't keep paying you. So that's a fine line that you have to walk.
Absolutely. And that is why I found the best CTO on the planet to do all that. I think finding a great partner to balance out. And I think it goes back to understanding yourself. I think you and I talked about like who we are, how do we interact, and the feedback we get from public about, hey, you need to pull back. And knowing that it's strength or weakness, right? Being self-aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are really helps you build that team. And I think one of the best things I've ever done is finding the right partner to be like, hey, I'm going to do this part and you're going to be handling the other part. And I have a great partner that refused to talk to any other human beings because she's in tech. She's more in quality assurance. She wants to like recode. And she's like, why don't you go on the podcast? And I never talk to other human beings. That's like, got it. And that has just been a great partnership. But I know you run solo. So that's probably a little bit different.
No, as you're saying that, I'm like, it would be nice to have a really great partner. And honestly, it's not that I've never tried to have a partner, but sometimes I have, and it doesn't end up working out. And honestly, I think there's a couple reasons for that. But I like, when I'm hearing you say that, I'm like, man, it would be nice to have someone that you could trust and that could do the things that maybe you're not as great at. Like, running operations, I've had to be good at, but it's taken a lot of work because that's not I am like, when it comes to like the sales stuff, I've got a lot of training on that, a lot of time on that. And so I've gotten a lot better, but like that, I really enjoy. It's problem solving. It's finding out what's going on. It's getting to know people, interacting with them. When it comes to the operations stuff, sure, I can like build out a process and figure it out, but it's the figuring it out that I enjoy. It's not the implementation and the keeping up of the implementation. So I've had to get really good. I've had to pay people to come in and help me to make it better. So if I could have someone that was like that, I'm like, man, that would be incredible. And so I was going to ask you, when you talk about finding someone, a good person that helps balance you out so that you can really do the things that you do best, because people, I feel like, say, hey, we need to work on our weaknesses. But I think it was Michael Jordan who said you need to also work on your strengths too. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm like doing the Michael Scott, like Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott quote thing. But I'm pretty sure I've heard someone say like you need to not just like work on your weaknesses, yeah, but like also working on your strengths because you could be getting even better at them. So like, how do you talk about how you found a partner and how that actually comes to life in your agency?
Oh, trial and error. I to be very honest with you, I did not start CodeSpace. I came in as a third partner. There was two other developers that started the company, and two developers are great at developing, not necessarily building the company. And like you said, my operations might be your strength, and that's mine as well. Certain things I'm just not good at. I don't know how to code. I understand the ecom life cycle because I've been in the industry for a while, but it does not mean that I know how to really function and understand coding. And so it took trial and error to understand, like, wow, this guy's personality just does not fit with me, and he really can't talk to clients. So eventually they all left, and I think that's the best part of life, is that time really will tell. If you continue to strive for the things that you believe in, especially when I say this is what I think the core value should be. I mean, I built the core value. I said this is what we should do. Q as in code space. You guys came up with the word code space. I think the Q has to mean something. The Q means quality. And what does that mean? It goes back down to transparency. I think a lot of development work, people don't tell you what they're doing. Hence why your site
And they probably don't have to,
great.
right? They probably
They
don't have to
don't.
tell you, right? Yeah.
Because nobody understands it. I always say the kind of work I do is like plumbing. You don't ever call a plumber until shit hits the fan.
Right.
And by the time we come in,
That's a great point, yeah.
right?
Or
Yeah,
they're
by the time we come in,
building a house from scratch maybe, and then you're contracting them in. But yeah, that's a good. How many people are like,
yeah.
man, I just need to get my pipes checked out. That seems like a really good idea.
And then you came in, I'm like, listen, you got black mold. You haven't fixed this in a while. The guy beforehand just used tape. That's why it didn't work out. But
Duct
then
tape can
okay,
do a
spend
lot
so
of
much
stuff,
money.
but it can't fix things.
It goes back to the infinite game. How do you want to build this foundation? Right? It goes back to how much are you willing to invest in? And we're going to be very transparent in what we do, and we're going to tell you what we do. Here's a dedicated project manager that knows how to speak human language besides coding. And that's another thing. It's you cannot build trust when you're not speaking the right language with your brands. Yeah, I forgot what a question is because it keeps
The
going.
question was, what is your middle name?
I don't have one.
Oh,
Asians
really?
don't have middle names. Yeah, we don't. I have a spy name.
Yes, I would like to hear that. If you can't tell it on air, then you need to tell me later. But I'll come up with a spy name. My mom has a middle name. She grew up Catholic, and so she has a confirmation name, and then she has her maiden name and took my dad's name. And so like in my phone, she comes up as her name, middle name, confirmation name, maiden name, our my dad's, or our last name. And my daughter was like recently saying like, well, why is her name like, why does she have like all these different names? And my wife was like, your dad just does that as a joke, like it's in his phone.
But your phone doesn't say mom?
No.
Me neither.
It says Catherine Mary Julia Purcell Marr. That's all my mom's names. Yeah. What's funny is that my wife's name is just her actual name. It doesn't say wife or anything like that.
Does she take your last name?
Yes.
Okay. That was something that I struggled because I have a spy name. Because I really, Carol my father made that for me when I was in Australia. It's not my legal name. My legal name is in Chinese, so nobody knows how to pronounce it. My dad's like, "You're gonna be Carol now." I got it. And so my husband was like, "Yeah, you're gonna take my last name." I was like, "Bro, listen, I really work really hard to be Carol Shih for a long time, and then now I have to change it to something else. I got to rebrand myself again. It's just too much work. It goes back down to how lazy I was to not change the last name." So
that's something that my wife and I talked about, and she was she wanted to take my last name. However, she is an only child, and her name will basically die with her. And so she's actually said, hey, maybe I should have like changed my middle name to at least be that, to like preserve that. And like my wife and I have one daughter, so like my name is going to go with that as well. But it just, I think it is what it is. I couldn't pick that out.
Your wife and your daughter is very lucky to have a pretty cool last name to inherit to. Whereas when my parents got divorced, my mom's like, do you want to change to my last name? And I said, absolutely not, because my mother's last name is Ho. So that wasn't going to help with my career.
Man, that maybe it could have helped with your career.
You're going to remember me.
You're going to remember me. That's Carol Ho signing off. Man, now I kind of want to change my name to Carol Ho.
It's about branding. All about branding.
I think you have talked about like owning being an agency owner, talking about, being authentic in that space. And that's something that's paid off for me. It's paid off for you. And I think it has been instrumental in developing relationships. It has been instrumental in building trust with your team, building trust with your clients. And even though I'm not the biggest generating agency in my space, even though we don't have the most aggressive growth, I still feel like we've been able to build, company character and leave a good name and a good legacy for ourselves. So like, even if that's a little bit slower, I've kind of just come to a place where I'm like, I'm okay with that. I still want to, you're right, like revenue is important, and I want to generate revenue and I want to generate profitability. I want to be able to take care of my team. I want to have reserves in case something happens. I want to be able to, to take care of my clients well, but I'm okay with leaving maybe a better legacy than just growing.
You hit the nail on the head. Legacy is what I live for. And I think when we talked about, we're built in the creator's image, what you leave behind when you're gone is not just the money, the car, the house, right? Granted, your kid's going to be very grateful for those things, but you're also leaving memory and legacy. And I think that is the most important thing that I want to strive for, is being an agency owner and being what we call leader. We do need to lead a team to a better and more authentic self in life. And if you're going to be working with us, and I think that's also another thing, is not really working for us. You're also working for yourself. You're learning and you're growing. And I think that conversation of being authentic and being true and kind and bold, like what we've been talking about, has to be the core of how we build our business. And that is also how we interact with our brands.
I started, a company because I wanted to be my own boss. So like, I totally get that, because I've had good and bad bosses, but also just going on my own was like the thing that I needed to do to be in e-commerce. There was no like e-commerce company, 14 years ago that I really knew, or anyone that was super leading it. I mean, there were companies, of course, but it's of course, blown up. But I never really wanted to be managed by anyone. I wanted to have a little bit of freedom. Now, of course, that means I have to own the mistakes as much as I own the positive stuff. But I never want to, I am the leader. I do have to make the tough calls. I have to hire people. I have to fire people. I have to coach people. I have to correct them. I want to also give them praise as well. So like, I know that there are all those roles, but I never wanted to be the boss that ruled by fear. And I think that's the problem, is people talk down to other people because either they feel more important and they feel like they need to make people subjugate to them. Maybe they are less self-aware, and so they don't actually care about how people feel. But I also think that there's maybe a vulnerability piece, that they feel like they open up, they're going to open themselves up to correction, and they're going to be wrong, and that's going to be bad. And some of the best conversations I've had, some of the best experiences I've had, clients and team members, now don't get me wrong, the wins are great too. Like those are also can be character building. But the times when I've said, hey, look, that's my bad. Like I should have done better on that. Majority of the time, clients and team members say thank you, or like, hey, I appreciate that. And that means a lot. I haven't really had anyone like get really angry with me because I said I'm sorry, is basically where I'm going with that.
That's you. That's all you, Michael. I mean, I do the same thing. I think the amount of times I apologized, and that's us being human, right? Admitting that, hey, I screw up all the time. And if you're allowing me to screw up, that means I'm going to allow you to screw up, which is why our culture is about welcoming mistakes. And that's how we grow.
I also will tell clients like, hey, I want to be accountable to you, but I also want you to be accountable to me. It's like, if I ask you for something, I'm going to keep following up with you to the point of being annoying, because I want that thing from you, because I also know that if I don't do what it is that you're looking for from me, even if I ask you and then, 3 months later, the thing doesn't happen, you're going to say, hey, why didn't this thing happen? And I'll say, well, I told you about it 3 months ago. But then you're going to say, well, why didn't you remind me? Like, why didn't you stay persistent? So like, I will bug clients for things because it's in service to them. It's in the same way that sometimes people know they maybe want something, but they don't know exactly what they want or exactly what they need. Like, hey, I want to grow, but like, why do you want to grow? And what do you need to get there? And so I want to make sure that we're actually fulfilling on our obligations, just in the same way that if someone was like, hey, you told me you were going to get me this thing and you didn't get it to me, I want to be accountable to that. And I either need to get it to that person on time, client, team member, or I need to be able to say, hey, I'm sorry, that slipped my mind. I'm going to get this to you by this time, and then actually do it, because our word is bond in many ways.
It truly shows that you care. If you don't care about your client's business, you wouldn't go up to them and be passionate and be angry sometimes, and even have arguments. So those things I do welcome. I think those are part of having a business and dealing with clients. It's very emotional. I think that's what we do all day long.
Someone on my team and I have talked about this, but it almost feels like we care a little bit too much. And I don't mean that in like a bleeding heart kind of way, just like, man, I really want to do a great job for you. And if we can't, or something happens, or it doesn't work out with a client, like, man, I kind of take that personally. Like, I really wanted to be able to do well in that regard.
I want to see you win. I think that's a lot of conversations I have. Like, in order for you to win, it feels like a very parent to child thing, right? I want you to win. All right. That's why I care. And that's why we're having this conversation. And you know, that nurturing relationship can be really beautiful sometimes. I have quite a bit of clients that's been with us for a number of years, and you see that growth, and, you know, you develop this trust and friendship. And I think that's a lot of times where I find comfort in being an agency owner, is that, hey, you know what? We're not saving lives, but we are changing mindsets, and we are changing how people view business, and, you know, one at a time.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much that we can do, and if we're not going to impact every single person, I feel like, you know, you could be the superstar. Like, I'm a big Prince fan, but Prince super impactful on a musical level, but he really was not the nicest person to the people that he interacted with, and he was very self-involved, and I recognize that. So I think, you know, it's not either or, but what if I could just be really impactful with my friends, with my neighbors, with people at my church, with my family, with, you know, people at other companies that I work with, whether I agree with them or not, whether we see eye to eye. Like, what if I could just be a more loving person, and that would actually maybe change their mind about, I mean, something, I don't know, but like, and then I could also receive that too from them.
I agree, 100%. I do want to chat with you about your religion and church life. I grew up in a missionary Christian American school for 10 years, and the foundation of kindness and goodness and faithfulness is inherited in us. And I say us, I mean me and you.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I got you. Yeah, I'm an open book about that, and honestly, the more that opens me up to some like critique, which I'm okay with. It's a little bit of a level of accountability. If I say I'm about something, I need to be about it. And the people that do say they are and don't really reflect like the love of Jesus, like that's what causes people to have what I have for a very long time heard of church hurt. They're just like, there's work hurt, there's church hurt, there's
not mocked you, but like was like, I don't know. I had some people who've been like, you're just too nice. And like you said earlier, you care too much. You're not focusing on the revenue. You're not focusing on that. And I have to really sit down and look in the mirror and be like, why am I doing this? Why am I starting this company? What am I doing it for? And it goes back to the legacy I want to leave behind. But like you said, revenue still has to be valued, because that's what we do. We still have to be good at what we do, right? Fair balance, still something I'm learning.
The thing that you're fair to say that, and I think one of the things that I got coached on and I've seen actually be really powerful is I would be too nice to maybe someone on my team. Not necessarily a client, but like I'm too nice to someone on my team. And what I mean by that is oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Like, you didn't do that thing. Not a big deal. And it's not because I'm afraid of confrontation, but I also want to encourage people. And the best thing that I did was be very clear about, here's what my core values are. Here's what it means to live up to those. And if you don't live up to those, this is not going to be a good fit for you from a team member perspective. And it's not easy conversations. And there are people that have been with me for a while that I had to let go because they weren't reflecting those core values. And it was, man, like that really was, I know it was very tough for them, but like, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I don't want to fire people. That's not what I became a business owner for, but it comes with the territory. It's like the more real I am about that too, and the more I get in conversations with people and say, look, here's what my expectation is. Here's what happened. Talk to me about what happened there. And I give them an opportunity to share. Then I can say, all right, well, like, I understand that. Here's still what my expectation is. That needs to be lived up to, or this really is not ultimately going to work out. And I feel like giving people the opportunity to step up, really, they either do step up or they just show that they don't want to be a part of it. And when they're not accountable or they don't actually show accountability multiple times in a row, they'll oftentimes leave before I ever have to do anything.
I used to avoid these tough conversations. It just makes you cringe. You don't want to go into it, you know. This is what I live for now. This is all I care about. It really is bringing out the potential of people and really asking ourselves, like, what do we care about here? But yeah, tough conversations, Michael. You're doing great.
Tough conversations, and I think we talked about before, like people having bad experience with bosses. You can actually be a good representation of what, loving but also firm can be. Like truth, there's oftentimes a line of truth that you have to cross that can be very painful, but there is grace on the other side of that, or there's an invitation to be something more. That's honestly like a lot of what my church is talking about right now is like, yes, like Jesus drew lines in the sands, but also there was a ton of grace, and the people that didn't want to extend grace, like that kind of said something about them. But there were also people that all they wanted was the grace piece. There was a piece of truth that they were not willing to cross. And like truth can be difficult, but there's also freedom on the other side of that.
Wise words, Michael.
Did you know that? Well, those aren't mine, but thank you. Did you know, I just stole them from somebody. Did you know that when my daughter would come home from school every day for a long time, I used to say like, hey, how did school go? Oh, it went well. And I'm like, did you win? And she would say, what? I'm like, did you win? And she just eventually knew to say, yes, I won. And then I just got home from this trip recently, and she was, asking me about it. And my wife was like, did you win? Like she was supposed to say that to me. So she asked if I won, and I said, yes, I did win.
What do you do when she says, no, I lost today?
She's never said that, but if she did, I would just be like, well, like, hey, tell me how you, I think she's normally just like, whatever, Dad. But if she said I lost, like, hey, like, why did you lose? Tell me about that. And the stuff that kids deal with, adults are still dealing with. Like, hey, I did this thing and I sucked at it. I'm like, what do you mean you sucked at it? Well, I wasn't very good. Okay, well, how many times have you done that? Well, it's like, my second time. You're like, your expectations are off there. I had people on my team recently who are saying, man, it's really challenging to do this thing. And I said, I would expect that. Like, it's okay. It's just accept that it will be challenging. I believe that we will get through it, but like it's gonna be challenging and it's gonna take time. But I'm okay with that. My expectations are not perfection. But the funny thing is, it's really easy to give people advice. It's a lot harder to take it.
I was just gonna say, how many times do we say that to ourselves? Like when we started these agencies, we expect to immediately, especially when you and I met at that master group, there was like 50, 60 agency owners that was like light years ahead of me. Mm-hmm. And there is that imposter syndrome. I'm like, I'm not going to make it. I suck at this. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. My P&L is all over the place. I don't know how I'm going to get clients. My branding is all over the place. But it's like you said, it's a reminder, how long have I been doing this? And how long have they been doing it?
Something I came to the realization of this last year is like, it may just take me longer to do stuff, and that's okay. Or maybe like someone who's an agency owner, maybe they came from an agency. I did not. I came from owning my own e-commerce business, and then before that, managing coffee shops. And even with a little stint in between when my e-commerce business crashed and I had to start my agency, I was like, well, I got to do something. I got to make a little money. while I figure out, how to use this skill set. So that was, building from the ground up. There was not a lot that I knew how to do. I don't even know if you could guess my college degree unless I've told you before.
I'm gonna guess you're similar to me. Is it communication?
No. More fine arts.
What?
More fine arts.
I have so many questions.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, and then that's going to be the end of the podcast. No questions after that. You ready? My major was Asian Studies.
No, it's not.
Yes, it was.
Oh my.
Here's why. I took Japanese all throughout, like junior high, high school, and then in college. And I was tired of being in school, and I just wanted to get out. And so I was like, what do I have the most credits for? And my advisor was like, well, kind of Asian Studies is close. I was like, sold. I'm going to do that one. And everyone else was double majoring in business and Asian Studies and international relations and Asian Studies. And I was just Asian Studies.
日本語少しわかるです. I know a little Japanese.
I don't remember much Japanese other than like, お手洗い行ってもいいですか? And all the Filipino people on my team teased me, and they thought it was like, trying to find Asian dating sites. And I was like, no, that's not what it was. It was actually studying more of the other stuff. But it was, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I wanted to get out.
We're having our next podcast in Japanese. You better button.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I've got books over here that I can study if I need to, but it sounds like you know Japanese too.
So speaking of Asian studies, the reason why I know, so I'm Taiwanese. I grew up in Taiwan. The reason why I know Japanese, want to take a wild guess why? My grandparents spoke Japanese.
Oh, okay.
Oh, they took over the country real good. Yeah. And also I took Korean in college. So if you know Mandarin, and I know the Taiwanese dialect, a lot of the dialect words are very similar and rooted from Japan. So once you can pick up one of the languages, you can pick up a little bit Korean, you can pick up Taiwanese, you can pick up.
And a lot of the characters like in Mandarin and in Japanese are very similar. The one thing I've noticed is like the intonation is a little bit different in like Mandarin versus Japanese. Like Japanese is it's much more hard consonants, a lot of stuff like that, where there's like more inflection and stuff like that in vowels in Mandarin, but there's like a lot of crossover. All right, well, I know what I'm going to be doing for the next podcast, studying Japanese. If people want to know more about what you are doing, Carol, where can they find you? Are you going to be studying Japanese? Are you going to be in Taiwan? Are you going to be on LinkedIn? Tell people where they can find out more about what you're doing.
Definitely on LinkedIn. I am currently in Taiwan for vacation. Again, I immigrated to America by myself, so my entire family is still here. So it's been really cool to bring my son and my American husband home. They are just losing their minds with all the food and how cheap everything is. But the downside is it's very humid, and they're like, I understand why you moved to the United States. Pros and cons. But I am only here for a couple of weeks. I will be back in the United States, and I will be back in LA. To find more about me in Code Space, definitely on LinkedIn. Also follow me on Instagram as well.
Thanks for coming on. And that's all we got, people. Get out of here. We'll see you later. All right, that was the show. What did you think? That was the longer game. We would love for you to share the show with other people and to leave us a review of the show. So go to iTunes, go to Spotify, you can go to YouTube, comment, leave a review, and share this on any social channels that you are active on and wherever you have influence. We want to share this story and stories like it to as many people as possible. Do you have a compelling story and do you want to come on the podcast and talk about it, and you're in the retail industry, then go to thelongergame.com, fill out a form, and we will contact you about coming on the show. You can find us on any social channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and you can go to our website, thelongergame.com, to actually read all of these episodes in blog form in text, because we know not everyone's going to listen. This podcast is brought to you by my agency, Cartology. We are a customized, done-for-you service agency that helps brands win on Amazon. It is super complex selling on the Amazon marketplace. We help simplify that for you. This podcast is also brought to you by Podcastify Me. They are a full-service podcast production company that designs podcasts around people who are paid for their advice. That is coaches. If you want someone to help create, strategize, and distribute your podcast to the masses, go to podcastify.me to find out more. I've so enjoyed that you've been a part of the conversation and that you've given up your time to hear these people's stories. We'd love for you to share. If you want to find out more, just go to thelongergame.com. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Stay blessed. And until next time, cheers.